What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction and review of Amazon MGM's Space Odyssey epic film, Project Hail Mary. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten out to the theaters to see this movie yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. Project Hail Mary is an American-made science fiction adventure film produced and directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, and written by Drew Goddard, based on the 2021 novel by Andy Weir. It stars Ryan Gosling, who also produced the film, Sandra Hüller, James Ortiz, and Lionel Boyce. The film follows the story of Ryland Grace, a man who awakens on an interstellar spacecraft with no memory of how he came to be there. Project Hail Mary premiered in London on March 9th of 2026 and was released in the United States by Amazon MGM Studios on March 20th. The film has received positive reviews to this point and has grossed $141 million to this point, becoming the 9th highest grossing film of 2026. In fact, at the time of the making of this video, this movie has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 315 critic reviews, with its popcorn meter currently sitting at 96% based on over 5,000 verified ratings. The movie has a Metascore of 77 on Metacritic based on 54 critic reviews, with a user score of 8.4 based on 212 user ratings. And finally, the movie has an 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb with over 50,000 ratings. So, this film got a lot of hype before it actually came out. So much so that I literally started to think that this film was slated to be among the best films of the year. So, of course, with that in mind, I went into the theater pretty much expecting to witness cinematic perfection, because that's what all the aggregates told me. And they did so with so many reviews that I thought to myself, well, all these people can't be wrong, can they? And after having seen this movie in its entirety, I have to say, though the movie was good, the movie was also a lot. Now, I thought the opening image created intrigue, which I believe was the reason it was chosen. Making use of the in media res technique, that being the technique of starting a story in the middle and then using flashbacks to show the audience how the characters got to the point in which the story began. And I typically don't mind this kind of storytelling, provided that the flashbacks have structure and an order to them, one that suits the story being told. One that, unfortunately, at least in my opinion, this story didn't have. And I'm not talking about it didn't have, it didn't suit the story being told, but I just didn't like, it felt like the flashbacks lacked structure. But I think this film is kind of reminiscent of Gravity with Sandra Bullock, mostly because for a decent portion of the film, we're simply watching Ryland Grace, played by Ryan Gosling, wake from a coma to find himself on a spaceship, all alone, well, semi all alone, right? There's 3 dead bodies on the ship with him. And then bungle around while he tries to figure out how to be an astronaut. So, like I said, intrigue, right? This is definitely something that makes you go, that's interesting. I'm interested to see how this character found themselves in this particular situation. So, gold star for the screenwriters. That said, this movie moves at an absolute snail's pace. And if I'm being honest, that was one of the larger issues I had with it, because I thought this film in all honesty, could have been a full 30 minutes shorter than it was without losing any of the things that made it good. I felt like a lot of time was wasted on silence in this movie. And don't get me wrong, that silence can be powerful when used appropriately, but silence is deadly in a movie with an extended runtime, if for no other reason than the fact that people just don't want to sit still for 3 hours in these types of situations if they don't absolutely have to. You know, my point is that if the silence really serves the movie, if the movie is really, really, really gripping, people will sit for 3 hours for the movie. But most of those movies tend not to do all that well at the box office. You go back and look at movies like Oppenheimer, or you go back and look at Napoleon, for example, right? Those were long movies. And, you know, I do understand that the silence was kind of woven into this story in a way that was kind of unique, right? It's a story about a guy, you know, chilling out by himself. So there's going to be bouts of silence that he kind of has to deal with. That's kind of part of watching the character kind of figure it all out, right? So I understand that silence was kind of narrative glue, so to speak, in this particular case. But I think ultimately, again, in this particular case, I think that silence hurt the movie more than it helped it. Because again, I think this movie just ran way too long. Not a little bit too long, way too long. And speaking of the things that helped the movie, I actually thought that Gosling was absolutely fantastic. He was charming and vulnerable in a way that served the story extremely well, especially in the many moments between the dialogue. And as I stated, there were many of those. Many of those. But even though it's still really early in the year, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that he'll be on the short list for an Oscar for this role. And I want you guys to remember I said that. As for the dialogue, I found it to be pretty good. It was extremely conversational. In fact, it reminds me a lot of how I write dialogue. And if you guys have been here with me for a while, then you know I like it when characters talk like actual people. I want to kind of feel like we, the audience, are simply dropped into a casual conversation between two people, or in this case, one person and an alien being. And speaking of the alien, I'm going to say something that's probably going to make a lot of people, you know, mad, get in their feelings. I didn't necessarily like the design of Rocky. Call it nitpicking, but I spent a lot of the film trying to get over that. And I was also unsure of the rules as it pertained to Rocky, which came into play quite a bit as the film dragged on, but I digress. Now, I'll admit, I found the climax to be compelling for sure. It was pretty exciting. Gold star there. But I thought the filmmakers lost all that they gained in that regard because they spent way too much time playing games with us, that being the audience, after the fact, in an attempt to subvert expectations, I'd imagine. All in the effort to get to what I thought would have been a decent enough ending if the filmmakers had actually had the stones to make a choice and solidify the theme. The ending pissed me off. Oh my God. After the mission was executed, almost everything that happened after that, I was just like, why? I'm like, so they go through all this trouble to cultivate what they were calling a predator to kill the dots that are eating the sun. And this was just so important that it had to get done. And then my man Rylan just goes, you know what? I'll send these samples back to Earth via drone so I can go back and save my man Rocky. So he was willing to risk 8 billion lives to go back and save one. And I'm just like, that's not the stuff a hero's made of. But I said, you know what? Okay, cool. You know, Rocky was in danger. So he goes back. And of course, he gets back to the ship. Nothing's wrong with the ship. And nothing's wrong with Rocky. So, there's no issue, no problem, right? But he's out of gas. So he has to go with Rocky back to his home planet. So he goes back with Rocky to his home planet. But it turns out he's not even planning to stay there. They're just fixing his ship, gassing it up so he can go home. But the story ends with Rylan still on Rocky's planet. And it was just a bummer. And I don't even want to talk about how they tried to make it seem like Rocky sacrificed his life to save Rylan right after he had gathered the samples. Because, Rocky bursts out of his protective, bubble in order to save Rylan. And he's smoking all over the inside of the ship. And, you kind of get like, oh, man, Rocky died saving Rylan, And just when you're about to salute and go, man, Rocky sacrificed himself to save his boy. Turns out Rocky's not dead. But the manipulation comes in that we spend almost 10 minutes assuming that Rocky is dead. And see, these are the kind of games that I don't necessarily like. I'm like, if Rocky's going to die saving Rylan, then go ahead and see that to fruition. If Rocky's not going to die saving Rylan, then my question becomes, why did he need to save Rylan in the first place? Why couldn't the mission just go off without a hitch? I mean, there was already enough drama with Rylan even spacewalking to gather the samples in the first place. We didn't have to have him nearly die after he was back on the ship and have Rocky nearly die trying to save him, and then have Rocky play dead for 10 minutes of the movie only to wake back up for no apparent reason, right? Because his bubble's been smashed. But, I don't know. I digress. But the end of the film, I just had serious, serious problems with the ending. And I want to say this, guys. I haven't read the books. I always tell you guys this channel isn't about books. So I don't know if this is what happens in the novel. And maybe that's why the movie went the way that it went, because this is what happened in the novel. But I always tell you guys is that when people who are making movies buy the rights to the novel, they're literally paying for the right to change whatever they want. So just because it happens in the novel doesn't mean it has to happen in the movie. But I digress. Now, overall, I'd give this movie a 75%, or a 7.5 out of 10 if you're thinking IMDb score. And we'll go with a B- for a letter grade. Now look, I've seen the aggregate scores for this film. Like I said. And in fact, again, like I said, I saw them before I even had a chance to go and see this movie in this particular case. So I went into the theater, again, expecting near perfection. But that's not what I saw here. What I did see was a good movie that had a great movie inside of it. A movie that I thought, honestly, could have used a bit more editing. A little bit tighter edit. And I know there will be those who tell me that because I don't agree with all the other critics that I simply don't know what I'm talking about. And, I guess that's fine, even though I've spent the last decade writing screenplays. But, whatevs. It's the internet after all. But as to whether or not you should spend $15 for this one, I'll just say, if you're down for a space odyssey with pretty good writing, a bit of humor and charm, and you don't mind the nearly 3-hour runtime, flashbacks that tend to run over the main story, and you're okay with a bit of narrative manipulation in the third act, and an ending that's no ending at all, then this is a movie that should give you exactly what you're looking for. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to get to the theater to see Project Hail Mary yet? If you have, what did you think about the way the flashbacks were used in this film? What did you think about Rocky, the alien? What did you think about the movie's ending or non-ending? And how did you feel about the movie's runtime? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, feel free to subscribe to my main channel and my new shorts channel for additional content. The links are in the description. In addition to that, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all on the next video.